Welcome. My name is Tony Goodman, and I am host of PlaceCast, a series discussing insights into everything about places across the UK, and especially what makes a happy, successful place that people want to visit. With guests from industry, academia, government, including influencers, decision makers, practitioners, and other experts, we will be exploring best practice to identify the latest trends and directions. Let's get started. My guest for this episode is Danielle McRorie-Smith, who is Director of the Go Forth Stirling bid, Advisory Member of British Bids, and a National Programme Manager for Scotland's Improvement Districts. I'm delighted that Danielle has joined us today to discuss what makes places happy and successful. Hi, Danielle. Please, can you introduce yourself and your various roles?
Absolutely. Hi, thank you very much for having me. So my name is Danielle McRorie-Smith. As you just introduced, I'm the National Programmes Manager for Scotland's Improvement Districts. Scotland's Improvement Districts is an organisation funded by Scottish Government to oversee, provide advice to and share best practice and generally support the bids across Scotland, of which as of Friday we now have 35, and then it would also be myself through that role in Scotland's Improvement Districts looking after areas that are exploring a bid or any bids emerging, moving to steering group and supporting them through that process. And then on a day-to-day, I lead Go Forth Stirling, which is a business improvement district of a city in central Scotland, gateway to the rest of the country by road, essentially. And then different hats that I wear on different boards and things, one of them being on the advisory board of British Bids.
So that's a very impressive resume, and obviously you're very well respected in the industry. And to be responsible for helping 35 bids is a considerable workload. I wanted to just briefly ask you about your background. Do you want to tell us about what you were doing before you got involved with bids?
Yeah, so my background's hospitality, and actually my degree, my higher education was an art degree in interior architecture, so a completely different route. But throughout my university and the years thereafter, I was focused on hospitality. I was a operations manager for a company looking after all different manner of shapes and sizes and different types of hospitality premises across Scotland. And that's really where my introduction to bids came from, by participating in different initiatives like pub watches, etc., ATCM's Purple Flag, through as wearing a hospitality hat. That's where I was introduced to the first bids that I joined as a board member.
Okay, what we're here to talk about today is what makes places happy and successful. And naturally, it's the aim of everywhere, and certainly the aim of every bid across the country to achieve that. So why don't we start by you telling me what you think makes a place successful and so makes it happy, and some of the things that stop it from being that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think obviously through the business improvement districts process, everything is about consulting with businesses and learning and responding to the needs of businesses in any geographical zone. So of course, the business improvement district model leaves things loose enough to allow the individual bids to focus on what their unique town or city or area needs. However, there are very, very common themes throughout the country that are consistent in what our bids typically deliver and help inform those projects. So, some of the main concerns that we hear every day, what's keeping our businesses up at night, shall we say, would be cleanliness, rough sleepers and begging, crime and antisocial behaviour, general perception of the area, pride of place, vacant units, maintenance and infrastructure, marketing of the area, encouraging footfall, and the level of theft and crimes that are specifically directed to business owners and their staff. And then lastly, wayfinding and signage. These are the main topics that come up as being on both sides, what businesses value, but also what they see as being their greatest concern that they would like a bid to focus on improving.
Okay, now it's interesting what you say there, because some of those, superficially at least, would seem to be within the scope of a bid, some of them outside the control. So for instance, you can have an influence on cleanliness, even though the cleanliness of the area is actually the council's responsibility rather than the bids. So I'm sure that you work closely with the council. But when we get to things like rough sleeping and crime, those are something that the bid would have to very strongly cooperate with other people in order to have any effect whatsoever. So this and vacancy is the same. So you need to, we've talked there about the need to partner and cooperate with the council, with police, with social services, with landlords about vacancies, and obviously, as you said at the beginning, with the levy payers, with the local businesses. So a lot of that work would seem to be more social work than business related. How do you go about establishing and managing those partnerships?
Yeah, so business improvement districts, exactly what you say there. They are not the council, they're not the police, but they are the connector. And they allow the formation of a bid in the most successful examples is, it is giving a collective voice, and it's all about additionality. Yes, there are statutory services and obligations, but the key point is that a bid goes over and above, and it manages those relationships, and it brings all the other parts and relationships together. And that's, in the most successful examples of bids, that is really where they thrive, and that's what they focus on doing very well. For example, a local authority relationship, yes, bids are there to hold the local authority accountable for their statutory services. That's why we have baseline agreements, etc. But actually the best examples of bids are those that are fully in partnership, collaborating together, and have a very, very strong relationship with the local authority, the police, etc. So essentially the bid connects the people who trade on the high street every day with the agencies responsible for managing that space, and where possible, supplementing the services that are already there.
So immediately two questions come to mind, because it's fascinating. It's number one, how do you achieve those partnerships? And number two, what level and frequency of contact do you have with your levy payers?
Okay, so in terms of achieving the partnerships, it's about communication. It's about appointing the right bid managers across the country in the different areas. We have bids typically are lean and agile and very small teams with an average staffing of, say, 2. But when, there is a, core fundamental purpose of them is engaging and communicating and knowing their business owners and operators personally, that works very well. And likewise with the different partnerships and organizations. So, yeah, and essentially, I think it takes time. It is not immediate. We have got, so Scotland voted. It was a successful ballot on Friday for our 35th bid, which is Let's Go Glasgow, Glasgow city centre bid, which is now, or now will be when it starts formally trading in April, the largest bid in the country for us in Scotland, and I believe about the 7th largest in the UK. And, you know, throughout that process of a year of getting to ballot and getting that successful mandate, it was a steering group very much made up of business representation, but also key partners that will assist the delivery and ensuring that while some of those partners may not have been those that will be levied or, levy payer of the bid, it was very important that they were at the table from day one in the formation and the creation of the bid. Because while businesses let us know their challenges and their concerns throughout that process, through all the consultation, we had to have those partners involved from day one before we went out with a business plan, and this is what we were going to deliver, because we had to ensure that we had the buy-in and the involvement of the different agencies that would make those deliverables happen.
And how much of your time in your bid is spent with those levy payers, or are you just mainly talking to the representatives of them? I'm just trying to get an idea for that feedback loop, which is always important in understanding what the issues are on the high street.
Yeah, I think in terms of in my bid, so in Go Forth Stirling, I've obviously been there for a great number of years now, and before I was operationally running the Business Improvement District, I was on the board, so I've been involved for the best part of the last decade, and it's about being approachable and having relationships with my levy payers, that they feel that they can access me at any point that they wish by whichever means is suitable for them. So in terms of we put out a Go Forth, every 2 weeks we have a newsletter updating, informing. We are at the end of the line, whether it be by phone call, by social media, by email, and we also have every fourth Wednesday, there's a networking Business Connects drop-in opportunity as well. And if you think about it as, specifically in my case for Go Forth Stirling, what I find beneficial as a bid manager is that it's my home. And it's whether I am, nipping into the shops or the hairdressers with one of my children or the dentist, those are my levy payers. And I am very much aware of what is happening in my own city 24 hours a day, because it's my home, and those businesses will have access to me out with business hours and being in the office, essentially.
And what you're saying is it's actually very personal to you, yeah. And you're heavily involved. What you describe actually reminds me of an old management technique that was used a lot in manufacturing and so on, which is called management by walking about. So, the senior manager would go down to the shop floor, have their face seen, and talk to people so that they tried to make known that they were approachable and people could come to them. It's an old technique that always worked, and by the sounds of it, still works for you.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that, that's a fundamental part of any bid manager's role. It's a, visibility. While I maybe personally struggle with being available to 600 businesses at all times, and, as we've described, there are an endless amount of different partners that I communicate with all day, and I need to be, at the computer communicating or meeting with them and dealing with the issues. I think it definitely is helpful when your zone, if you like, is also your home turf. So those non-working hours are very much all important, and ensuring that you're visible and approachable.
So going back to what you were saying before about the themes, cleanliness, rough sleeping, crime, vacancies, the level of marketing you do, and things like signage. A lot of those you can directly influence. One of the things that's become very popular is public realm works to make places look more attractive, just by getting some flora on the high street, getting some seating areas on the high street, making them more approachable, making them more inviting to increase the dwell time.
Yeah.
What type of things have you seen work across, well, not across the 35 bids, but across the 34 bids? We'll give Glasgow a bit of a breather on this one.
Yeah.
What's the best practice that you've seen work across the other 34, and maybe have planned for number 35?
Yeah, so the public realm management is definitely number two, if you like. We've already covered visible presence and communication and a point of contact, but number two on the list of if we were to create a toolkit for a successful bid, I would say public realm management. And good examples of that would be rapid cleanup teams, graffiti removal, shopfront improvement schemes, lighting upgrades, because I believe a clean street signals investment, and a neglected street signals risk. And if we want to fundamentally promote investment in our towns and cities, we have to care about how it looks. So, for public realm upgrades, a bid adding to that over and above, obviously local authorities, etc. That matters because it signals investment value.
And investment value is great.
And investment value is great because if we have investment value, we have higher footfall, we have higher spend, and then we are doing exactly what we have set out to do for the businesses.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that different town centres appear, and the differences that those with bids in them have made by diverting a relatively small amount of funds to those public realm works. Do you measure? Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to, I completely agree with that. And, we have bids across the country, and their levy income varies. And the perception and the appreciation of the bid, I wouldn't say is, varies to the same extent. We have bids with an annual income of £30,000, and that still matters as much as the bids or, the new bids that will be introduced that has a £3 million annual levy income to invest. So, different spaces need different amount of things, but by no means at all, we have an incredibly successful bid in North Glasgow, and they have what would be proportionately, a very low amount of levy. However, they pack a punch with what they deliver, and they deliver exactly what that community needs, and making it a more attractive, more vibrant, welcoming place. And they really encourage pride in that place, which I think is incredible. It doesn't necessarily mean that, big budgets equal big results. That sometimes the smallest interventions can go the longest way. And, we have the debate over, flowers in our towns and city centres often. But when we had post-COVID not had the florals on the high streets or to the same extent, that was noticed, and the perception was quite, it was our residents and our businesses were very negative and not appreciative of that. And we realised very quickly something as simple as hanging baskets and floral interventions go a very long way.
They do. In my area, we actually have groups of residents who man certain of those areas, not necessarily on the high street, but close to and in parks and other areas, because it's very widely seen by the residents rather than the businesses, that actually makes a difference to life. It can bring a smile to your face, which is part of what we're talking about, having a happy place. What you talked about with the public realm management of creating this investment value that leads to higher dwell, and therefore higher spend, is critical to the business owners.
Yeah.
So how do you, and this applies also to your marketing, because marketing is the other way of pushing this. How do you go about measuring that?
How do we measure it? So in a variety of ways. So in terms of data across all bids, typical projects, but bids tend to, if they have the means to do so, and different access to different organisations or agencies or partners and contracts, but bids capture and coordinate crime reports, footfall patterns, hotspot mapping, repeat incidents, and they use that information to shape joint interventions. And in terms of public realm management, in Scotland, a number of the bids do an annual audit with an organisation called Keep Scotland Beautiful. And that's important as well, so that we can show tangible results and improvements. And there's all sorts of different organisations that we partner with for different interventions. We've just done one with Keep Britain Tidy. We have different bids doing interventions with Zero Waste Scotland. And those organisations are very keen on ensuring that their interventions are measured and that they can quantify the result of whatever project that they've introduced there. And I think that's really helpful. So, all those things together create confidence. And again, confidence attracts investment.
So what we've seen is that a number of those things, I mean, the crime is obviously a big issue, unfortunately, across most of the country. And we've talked about keeping the town centres beautiful through the public realm works and flora and other things. Where you're measuring footfall, is the aim of the levy payers, your bosses, your shareholders effectively, is their aim just to get more people there, or is footfall just being used as a cipher for economic activity?
It's used in a variety of different ways. So in Stirling, we measure footfall and we are looking at different partnerships with the local authority to measure a whole manner of different things, in terms of introducing so many more active transportation links, cycling, etc. We're attempting to measure as much of that as possible to show the benefit. We would like our businesses, information is power. The more information, essentially it's a tool. The more information that we can deliver to the businesses, the more successful they can be by having that information. So if we can show them trends, if we can show them, there's a variety of different reasons that can really benefit their business model if they use it and they access that data that the bids or the local authorities or the partners can provide. But in terms of even, a lot of bids deliver events, and everything that we do, we are spending a levy payer's money. So what we have to do is make that, tangible and show them results and show them if that was money well spent, or inform our next year's delivery or our next term's delivery of projects or events, etc. And it's really important for us to be able to do that. And for me in particular, sometimes the data, such as footfall data, is incredibly important even for celebrating. I think that, if we can share the, if we have delivered something, or maybe not the bids directly, but if we can encourage pride of place by celebrating an increase in footfall and giving that a real life number, and data, true data. I think that's, it's always so much more successful. So yeah, and then I think as well in terms of, other data that's collected that informs businesses, not just in terms of, routines and tracking and trends and things like that, but it definitely benefits them when we are able to collect data. We have, a number of the bids have a crime reporting tool, or they have a tool that records graffiti, or a tool that records streetscape issues that are recorded and reported. And that allows us to track that, measure it, resolve it, and not repeat it. So yeah, I think there's a whole host of data. There's a whole host of reasons for that data. But I think that, for me personally, I like to shout about things. I like my local city celebrated. And if I can use facts and numbers to attach that, it's definitely a much easier thing to do.
So you split the events and proof points into two types. And looking at that, one is, if you like, the economic benefit to the high street, which is of prime importance to the levy payers. The other is the social benefit, the benefit that you described as pride of place, and the fact of bringing people there, which indirectly can lead. So one of the things that always strikes me is there are some things that a lot of town centres do that don't necessarily have a direct economic value, but have a great social value. And I'm thinking, because it's very timely, of things like Christmas lights, which go up everywhere. And I don't know about you, but for me, when I walk along the street and I see the Christmas lights up, I just smile.
Yeah, and that's, in my local area in Stirling, we decided a couple of years ago now that we were, going to extend that festive lighting through January and remove them in February, because we felt that, the perception and the pride in the place and the even from a safety perspective, those additional Christmas lighting have so much social value that when January hits, why are we whipping them away when it's such an important part of our city? And I think it was definitely a good choice of ours, in my opinion, to extend that through January and try and extend the joy, shall we say, of that festive period, rather than just hitting January gloom too quickly.
Yeah, I think it's always interesting to think about how you bring people in. So thinking about that, what do you see as best practice for your marketing activities to the communities? And how do you identify which the communities are that you're going to focus on?
Okay, so marketing for me personally, it's challenging with the bids, because I believe that it has to have a very clear split in terms of, are you marketing the bid, which is B2B, or are you marketing to consumers and promoting footfall on behalf of the businesses, which is B2C? And I think both of those need a very different strategy. I would not say that marketing the benefit of a bid is, it's necessary on Facebook and social media and whatnot, with the exception of LinkedIn and TikTok and all these kind of things. However, if you want to market well, in terms of promoting your place and promoting to consumers for the benefit of the businesses, then that's certainly social media. But our newsletters, of course, are B2B. So in Stirling, we realised that during COVID, and we set up a B2C brand separately to the bid. So in addition to Go For Stirling, which is very, very much B2B and all about, to our businesses, business support, sharing the information, sharing what data they needed and getting the right information to them. That has a very different strategy and stream and intention to what the introduced brand that we created in COVID called Independent Stirling. And that was really has a different strand, if you like, and has all your TikToks and these types of things sharing businesses in Stirling, the stories behind the independents, the reasons to visit Stirling that are different to the rest. If we, in terms of Stirling specifically, we are unique, not unique across obviously the UK, but we are a city, we have a university, we are right in between Edinburgh and Glasgow, which can be both a blessing and a curse. It means that we cannot compete retail-wise or hospitality-wise, if I'm honest with you, with Edinburgh and Glasgow. If you can jump on a train to either major city destination in 30 minutes, why it not only encourages people to leave our area, but it doesn't encourage them in. So we were really, really keen to market the unique reasons to visit Stirling. If you have Marks and Spencers in one, you have Marks and Spencers in the big ones as well, or different national brands and things. We can't compete, with the national brands. But what we can compete with is the independent businesses and the unique reasons to visit our area and the stories behind them. So we try and make it very personal on that strategy in terms of how we market businesses and how we encourage footfall and people to attend our area, because we want it to feel personal, feel welcoming, not feel shiny and glossy like one of the major cities that's full of national brands. So yeah, we our marketing is incredibly important, but as I say, it's important to us to be very conscious that we're marketing two very separate things to two very separate audiences, and sharing two very different messages. We're almost splitting the bid on two on that front.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. With regard to the B2C, you talked a lot there about the use of social media, and there's this thought profile in marketing about push and pull marketing for B2C. So to some extent, social media is pull marketing. It only goes to those people who are looking for it, in effect, who you've managed to get sign up and who actually read everything because they'll have too many hours worth of things in their stream. So the push is more directly marketing to them. Do you still do that?
Yeah, we do. So we have lots of not lots of, but we have a couple of other ways that assists us in that. So for example, we have the bid owns, operates facilitates, if you like, the free city centre Wi-Fi. So within that, we are able to directly market to individuals' phones as they attempt to connect to Wi-Fi, or we can do a whole manner of things with our Wi-Fi system in terms of we can direct them to a specific page, or a video can pop up. We can really promote a specific event, or we can actually gain a lot of information too by having surveys on there, or information a collection for whichever theme or project or meeting we have coming up. We can ascertain perception by asking the right questions. So certainly one of the best ways of doing that is through our Wi-Fi. And then we also, we do other marketing, radio ads, etc., that aren't just social media focused. We still do some, a limited amount, but some print marketing as well, which is more direct.
It's all about these days experimenting to find what works. And just to turn to one of the other things you were talking about, one of the when you were talking about information is power, one of the things you mentioned was events. So events vary massively. And we talked already about one of the typical ones, which is Christmas lights and events around that. And in some research that we'd done, we discovered that one of the things that attracted people most was, can't believe I'm going to say this, classic car rallies, which you can't have everywhere.
You're absolutely
and demos,
right.
but everyone wants to see them. So just get a few parked on the high street and people will come and look. Well, but not everyone can do those, or do they work everywhere? What do you find are the best type of events, not just in Stirling, but across the whole of Scotland? Do you see any common themes of things that work best in bringing people in, and particularly bringing them in for a sustained period of time?
Yeah, I think, you know, the view on events from the bids might be a little bit split these days, if you like. Certainly it is for myself as a bid manager, you know, where there is an appetite, and why is the bid not promoting all the footfall and doing endless events and things? You know, the cost of delivering, you know, quality or larger scale public, certainly events these days is, you know, cost prohibitive. You know, we do not have access to the same funds as we once did have. So to put on a successful event is into very large sums now, which is difficult. But across the country, you know, it goes without saying that seasonal events are always welcome. They're always promoted by the bids. Most bids, I would struggle probably to find any bid that does not do focused free events or at each of the kind of seasonal opportunities and around Christmas holidays and encouraging families, etc. But I do see a really successful example is Restaurant Week. I think that, you know, Aberdeen certainly have an incredibly successful Restaurant Week. Edinburgh has a version of as well that's incredibly successful. Theirs just takes a slightly different form to a week, if I'm totally correct in saying that. I don't know the full details myself, but I know it's something that's very well attended and celebrated. And anyone at Newcastle, I know that their Restaurant Week is very much appreciated, and certainly through the development of Glasgow city centre's bids over the last year, we were very keen to learn from the bids up and down the country at what was most celebrated, most successful, quick wins, if you like, and Restaurant Week, you know, even from the levy pairs that maybe had a national brand in both Newcastle and Glasgow, they were on board straight away and, you know, wanted that delivered for Glasgow city centre because they see so much value from it in the locations that it's there. So yeah, and a whole manner of things. We've obviously got some, you know, more high profile events coming up, you know, where there's some very big sporting tournament happening in the summer. Forgive me for mentioning it, but, you know, I think everyone will know that there is a World Cup coming up, and it's been 28 years, I'm pretty sure the number is, in Scotland was last in it. So I think we will struggle to find a bid that is not doing something to celebrate Scotland being in the World Cup this summer. And then we obviously have Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, and then we'll have the Euros coming up in future years as well. So yeah, there's a lot of seasonal events, but there's a lot of unique events. A couple of years ago, we had the UCI World Championships, which is the cycling tournament championship. Based in Glasgow, Stirling had the time trial events as well, and that was such an incredible event for us. You know, the bids put on fan zones and things, and it was really unbelievable the footfall driving that did, and we were thankfully able to measure that and have that piece of press that said, okay, yeah, we spent a bit of money, this is what we did, and look at the return in terms of footfall, and, you know, that your businesses will have benefited from in the city centre.
Okay, I always like to ask people what their favourite tips are for other bids as to what really works. But perhaps with you, we should just ask what you've helped Glasgow plan for, because this is a clean sheet of paper.
It is, yeah, and Glasgow, it's very unique. Glasgow has introduced a few different metrics, if you like. They are focusing their levy on businesses with a rateable value above 100,000, not those below. So they had to do that because it's a very large zone. They have an incredible amount of focus on safety. Their safety budget annually will be circa £800,000. So that is, that is the type of sums that we think we will see delivery from very quickly. But I think, coming back to budgeting for Glasgow and the kind of advice and, the part of that planning process that I really appreciate being part of, was that, bids are delivering through partnership and place management, but fundamentally, I believe safe places trade better. Clean places attract people and confident places grow. So I think if you can, make them safe, make them clean. I'm not saying we're going to wave a magic wand by any means, but we can, invest an additional £800,000 per year in safety in the public realm and be a single business-led voice in the city centre and share that reporting. We will signal confidence to investors and developers, and create a city centre that feels cared for and therefore investable. So at the end of the day, while all this is to deliver additional services and projects for the area, for the zone, the fundamental behind it all is, economic development and creating a better future for the area. And for that, we want more investment. So yeah, I think that's incredibly important. So yeah, I think Glasgow my conversations this week certainly will mostly concern Glasgow, but we're obviously, it's been it was an incredible amount of work, and it was a very long year getting to this point. And I think the fact that the result that Glasgow achieved in that ballot with 87% yes, certainly is a very, very strong mandate for businesses deciding that they need more and they would like more. So it's definitely time for them to deliver that.
And as you said before, Glasgow will be effectively the 7th largest bid in the country, in the UK. So what do you have to suggest for the rest, the middle pack?
What do I suggest in terms of projects or for successful?
Well, your main recommendations for success, for making a successful, happy place, things that they can achieve within that middle range of budgets rather than just the very small budget.
Yeah, I think in the middle range of budgets, I would certainly say, it does come back to pride and public perception and positivity, and it might sound very simplified. And yes, I could rhyme off all the projects that I think every bid should have, and they should have, pub watches and a safe base and, rapid cleaning and shopfront improvements and things like that, or, a ranger or ambassador team, radio networks. But I think, to be honest with you, in the most simple terms, I think if you can encourage positivity, when we have press for a local area that only, at the end of the day, what is going to sell news or clickbait and whatnot is negative. And I think the bids and all the partners need to counter that with putting pride into their place and celebrating absolutely everything they can. And that's what we try to do at Stirling. We do so quite successfully because there is a lot to celebrate, of course. We're not clutching at things to say and making up stories that are wonderful about our city. You know, our city, every town has incredible achievements every single day. And I think the more you can promote that, the more the public perception or business perception is that this is a place that's investable. This is a place where I want to put down my roots. This is a place where I want to visit, or this is a place where I want to spend my money. And yeah, I just think that's incredibly important, and generates the end goal quicker that we look to achieve.
Your positivity is infectious, and I'm sure our listeners will take a great deal from this. Danielle McRorie-Smith, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.